Amy Brooks was not like other space marines. While her friends spent their free time drinking in bars or playing games in the ship's entertainment rooms, Amy packed her bags and went camping on the most dangerous planets she could find. She called it her hobby, but everyone else called it crazy. Amy had been doing this for 3 years now. She would pick a planet that other people were afraid to visit and spend a week there with just her camping gear and some special traps she had built herself. So far, she had camped on 12 different death worlds and come back alive every time. Her fellow Marines thought she had a death wish, but Amy knew better. She just loved the challenge. The planet she wanted to visit next was called Kepler 442c. The military files said it was home to creatures called shadowhounds. These beasts were as big as bears but had 6 legs instead of 4. They had claws that could cut through metal and teeth that could crush bones. They hunted in packs and had killed every human who had ever tried to live on their planet. 3 different groups had tried to build colonies there, and all of them had failed. The survivors who made it off-world said the Shadowhounds were like nothing they had ever seen. Amy read every report about Kepler 442c that she could find. The more dangerous it sounded, the more excited she became. She started planning her trip and making a list of all the gear she would need. This would be her biggest challenge yet, and she could hardly wait. The first person she had to convince was her commander, Jake Morrison. Amy walked into his office with her vacation request form and placed it on his desk. Morrison looked at the form and then looked at Amy like she had lost her mind. "Brooks, you want to go camping on Kepler 442c, Morrison said. "That planet is off. Limits to everyone. The Alien Coalition declared it a no-go zone after what happened to the last colony ship." Amy sat down in the chair across from Morrison's desk. She had expected this reaction. "Sir, I have been camping on dangerous planets for 3 years, and I have never had a serious problem. I know what I am doing." Morrison shook his head. "This is not camping, Brooks. This is suicide with extra steps. Those Shadowhounds have killed trained soldiers with heavy weapons. What makes you think you can survive out there with camping gear?" "Because I am not going there to fight them, sir," Amy said. "I am going there to avoid them. I have traps and sensors that will keep me safe while I sleep. The creatures on other planets have learned to stay away from my camps after the first night." Morrison picked up Amy's file and flipped through it. Her record was perfect. She had never failed a mission and had saved the lives of 6 other Marines during the battle of Titan Station. More importantly, she had survived camping trips on planets that had killed other people. There was something special about the way Amy Brooks thought about danger. "What kind of traps are we talking about here?" Morrison asked. Amy pulled out her tablet and showed Morrison pictures of her gear. Motion sensors that can track anything bigger than a rabbit from half a mile away. Automated defense turrets that fire stun rounds instead of bullets. Net traps that can catch something as big as a truck. Flashbang charges that can blind and confuse pack hunters. Everything is designed to stop threats without killing them. Morrison studied the pictures. Amy's gear looked more advanced than some military equipment he had seen. "You built all this yourself?" "Yes, sir. I have been working on these designs since I started camping on dangerous planets. Each trip teaches me something new about how to stay safe in hostile environments." Morrison was quiet for a long time. He knew that Amy was one of his best Marines and that she had never asked for anything unreasonable before. He also knew that if he said no, she would probably just put in for a transfer to a unit that would let her go. "All right, Brooks," Morrison said finally. "I will approve your vacation request, but with conditions. You will check in every 12 hours. You will carry an emergency beacon that can call for immediate extraction. And if anything goes wrong, you will activate that beacon. Without trying to be a hero, Amy smiled. "Thank you, sir. I promise I will be careful." After leaving Morrison's office, Amy went to the ship's workshop to check on her gear. She had been building and testing her camping equipment for months. Everything had to be perfect because there would be no second chances on Kepler 442c. Her friend Lisa Murphy found her in the workshop. Lisa was a sergeant who had served with Amy for 2 years. She was one of the few people who understood why Amy did these camping trips. "So, Morrison approved your death wish vacation," Lisa said. "It is not a death wish," Amy replied. "It is just camping with better planning." Lisa helped Amy load her gear into transport cases. There were motion sensors, automated turrets, trap components, camping supplies, and enough food for 10 days. Everything was lightweight and compact, but Amy knew from experience that it would all work exactly as designed. "You know the other Marines are taking bets on whether you come back alive?" Lisa said. "What are the odds?" Amy asked. 3 to 1 against, Amy laughed. "Those are terrible odds. Maybe I should put some money on myself." 2 days later, Amy was sitting in the pilot seat of a small shuttle heading toward Kepler 442c. The planet looked beautiful from space with its blue oceans and green continents. It was hard to believe that something so pretty could be so deadly. As the shuttle entered the atmosphere, Amy felt the familiar excitement that came with starting a new camping adventure. She had studied maps of the planet and picked out the perfect spot for her camp. It was in the middle of Shadowhound territory, which meant she would not have to wait long for her first visitors. The shuttle landed in a small clearing surrounded by thick forest. Amy could already see claw marks on the trees and bones scattered on the ground. This was definitely the right place. She unloaded her gear and watched the shuttle fly away. Now she was alone on one of the most dangerous planets in known space. With nothing but her wits and her traps to keep her alive, Amy looked around the clearing and smiled. This was going to be her best camping trip yet. Amy stood in the middle of the clearing and turned in a slow circle to study her surroundings. The area was about 50 feet across, with tall trees on 3 sides and a rocky hill behind her. Perfect. The trees would limit how many directions. The Shadowhounds could attack from, and the rocks would protect her back. She could see signs of the creatures everywhere. Deep claw marks scratched into tree bark at least 8 feet off the ground. Piles of old bones from animals the Shadowhounds had killed and eaten. The ground was covered with paw prints that looked like they came from something much bigger than any Earth animal. There was also a smell in the air that reminded Amy of wet fur and meat. Most people would take one look at this place and run back to their shuttle as fast as possible. Amy just smiled and started unpacking her gear. She had 3 hours before. The sun went down and the real hunting began. That was plenty of time to turn this death trap into her personal fortress. The first thing Amy did was pull out her motion sensors. These were small black boxes about the size of her thumb that could detect movement from half a mile away. She had 12 of them, and she placed them in a wide circle around the clearing. Each sensor was camouflaged to look like a rock or piece of bark. Even if someone knew what to look for, they would have trouble spotting them. The sensors would send signals to her tablet and show her exactly where anything big enough to be dangerous was moving. She could track up to 50 different targets at once, and the system would warn her if anything got within 100 yards of her camp. Next came the automated turrets. Amy had 4 of these, and they were her favorite part of her defense system. Each turret was about the size of a small cooler and could pop up from a hidden position in less than 2 seconds. They were loaded with stun rounds that would knock out anything smaller than an elephant and slow down anything bigger. The turrets were smart enough to tell the difference between Amy and a threat. They would never shoot at her, but they would fire at anything else that moved too fast or got too close to the camp. Amy placed them at the four corners of the clearing where they would have the best angles to cover the entire area. But the real magic was in Amy's trap network. She had been designing these traps for 3 years, and each one was built to handle a specific type of threat. The net traps were for big single targets like the shadow hounds. When something stepped on the hidden pressure plate, a net would shoot up from the ground and wrap around the creature. The nets were made from a special fiber that got stronger when pulled on, so struggling would only make them tighter. The pit traps were for pack hunters who might try to surround her camp. Amy dug 6 holes around the clearing and covered them, with fake ground that would collapse when stepped on. The holes were not deep enough to seriously hurt anything, but they would definitely slow down an attack. Amy also set up flashbang charges at key points around the perimeter. These would create bright lights and loud noises that would confuse and scare most animals. Pack hunters like the shadow hounds depended on coordination and communication, so breaking up their teamwork was often enough to make them retreat. The scent traps were Amy's newest invention. These were small devices that could release different smells to confuse predators. Some smells would make the creatures think there was a bigger predator in the area. Other smells would make them think Amy was somewhere she was not. Amy had tested these on 6 different planets, and they worked every time. As Amy worked, she kept checking her tablet to monitor the motion sensors. So far the area was quiet, but she knew that would change as soon as the sun went down. Shadow hounds were night hunters who used darkness to hide their approach. During the day, they slept in caves and underground tunnels. With 1 hour of daylight left, Amy finished setting up her traps and started preparing her campsite. She put up a small tent that was designed to be nearly invisible from more than 20 feet away. The tent had special fabric that would not show up on heat sensors and would not reflect light. Amy also set up a small cooking area with a fire pit that was surrounded by rocks to hide the flames. She would need hot food and coffee to stay alert during the long night ahead. The smell of cooking food might attract some curious creatures, but that was part of the plan. Amy wanted to know where the shadow hounds were, and drawing them to her traps was the easiest way to find out. As the sun touched the horizon, Amy made her final preparations. She checked all her equipment one more time and loaded fresh batteries into everything. She put on her night vision goggles and tested her communications gear. Everything was working perfectly. Amy also checked her emergency beacon one more time. She had promised Commander Morrison that she would use it if things went wrong, and she planned to keep that promise. But she was confident that her traps would handle whatever the planet could throw at her. The last thing Amy did was review the intelligence reports about shadowhound behavior. These creatures hunted in packs of 3 to 8 individuals. They were smart enough to use simple tactics, and they could communicate with each other using low-frequency growls that humans could barely hear. Most importantly, they were curious about new things in their territory and would investigate anything that seemed unusual. Amy was definitely unusual. No human had ever set up a permanent camp in Shadowhound territory and survived more than a few hours. The creatures would certainly come to investigate, and when they did, they would find Amy's traps waiting for them. As full darkness fell over the clearing, Amy's motion sensors began to ping. Red dots appeared on her tablet screen showing movement in the forest around her camp. The Shadowhounds had found her scent and were coming to investigate. Amy settled into her camping chair next to the hidden fire and opened a pack of field rations. Dinner and a show. This was exactly why she loved camping on dangerous planets. She checked her tablet and counted 5 red dots moving toward her position from the northeast. "Come on, big guys," Amy whispered to herself. "Let me show you what human engineering can do." The red dots on her screen moved closer to her trap perimeter. In a few minutes, Amy would find out if 3 years of preparation had been worth it. She took a bite of her field rations and waited for the fun to begin. Amy watched the red dots on her tablet move through the forest toward her camp. 5 shadow hounds were approaching from the northeast, moving in a classic pack formation. 1 large dot in the center with 4 smaller ones spread out in a semicircle. This had to be an alpha male with his hunting party. The creatures moved slowly and carefully through the trees. Amy could not see them yet, but her motion sensors tracked every step. The pack was taking its time to study this strange new presence in their territory. That was exactly what Amy had hoped for. Cautious predators were much easier to trap than reckless ones. Amy finished her field rations and pulled out a cup of coffee. The hot drink would help keep her alert, and the smell might make the shadowhounds even more curious. She had learned on other planets that predators were always interested in new scents, especially ones that came from potential prey. The pack leader reached the edge of Amy's sensor perimeter and stopped. The red dot on her screen stayed in one place for almost 5 minutes. Amy could picture the big creature sniffing the air and trying to figure out what kind of animal had invaded its hunting grounds. The scent of human would be completely new to these creatures. Finally, the pack leader started moving again. It came straight toward the clearing with the other 4 shadowhounds following behind. Amy switched her tablet to the camera feeds from her hidden surveillance system. Now she could actually see her visitors. The shadowhounds were even bigger than the intelligence reports had suggested. The pack leader was at least 7 feet long from nose to tail, with muscles that rippled under. Its dark fur. Its 6 legs moved with perfect coordination, and its eyes glowed yellow in the darkness. The other 4 creatures were smaller, but still large enough to kill a human with one swipe of their claws. Amy had to admit they were beautiful animals. Deadly, but beautiful. She felt a moment of excitement as the pack approached her trap line. This was the moment of truth. 3 years of work was about to be tested by some of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The pack leader stepped into the clearing and immediately froze. Something was wrong, and the creature knew it. Its head swiveled back and forth as it tried to identify the threat. The other shadowhounds spread out behind their leader but stayed just outside the tree line. Amy held her breath. The pack leader was standing right on top of one of her pressure plates, but it had not triggered. Yet the creature was too smart to move forward without understanding what it was walking into. This was the critical moment. If the shadowhounds decided to retreat now, Amy would have to wait for another pack to find her camp. The pack leader took another step forward, and the pressure plate triggered. A net shot up from the ground with perfect timing and wrapped around the massive creature. The shadowhound let out a roar of surprise and anger as it tried to break free, but Amy's net was designed to get stronger when pulled on. The more the creature struggled, the tighter the net became. The other 4 shadowhounds immediately rushed forward to help their leader. This was exactly what Amy had hoped for. Pack animals always tried to rescue trapped members of their group, and that predictable behavior made them easy to catch. 2 of the creatures ran directly into pit traps and disappeared from view with startled yelps. The remaining 2 shadowhounds were more careful, but they triggered Amy's motion sensors, which activated her automated turrets. The turrets popped up from their hidden positions and began firing stun rounds. The stun rounds hit the 2 free shadowhounds and dropped them to the ground before they could react. The creatures were not seriously hurt, but they were unconscious, and would stay that way for at least an hour. Amy's turrets were programmed to use just enough force to stop a threat without causing permanent damage. At the same time, Amy's flashbang charges started going off in sequence around the clearing. Bright lights and loud explosions filled the night air. The trapped pack leader stopped struggling and cowered on the ground, with its eyes squeezed shut. The two creatures in the pit traps whimpered and tried to dig deeper holes to hide in. In less than 10 minutes, Amy had neutralized an entire pack of apex predators without leaving her chair. She finished her coffee and walked over to examine her handiwork. The pack leader was still wrapped in the net, but it was no longer struggling. Its yellow eyes watched Amy approach, but the creature seemed more confused than angry. "Easy, big guy," Amy said in a calm voice. "Nobody is going to hurt you. This is just a temporary inconvenience." Amy checked the two shadow hounds in the pit traps. They were both uninjured, but very unhappy about their situation. One of them tried to climb out, but the walls of the pit were too smooth and steep. The other one had given up and was lying on the bottom of the hole looking sorry for itself. The two unconscious creatures were already starting to wake up. Amy could see their eyes flutter as the stun rounds wore off. In a few more minutes, they would be back on their feet, but probably too confused to cause any trouble. Amy pulled out her camera and took pictures of each trapped shadow hound. These photos would go into her research files along with notes about their behavior and the effectiveness of her traps. Every camping trip taught her something new about predator psychology and alien animal behavior. After documenting the encounter, Amy activated the release mechanisms for her traps. The net around the pack leader dissolved into harmless powder that would blow away in the wind. The pit traps extended telescoping ladders that would let the trapped creatures climb out easily. Within minutes, all 5 shadow hounds were free and unhurt. The pack regrouped at the edge of the clearing and spent several minutes communicating with low growls and body language. Amy could not understand what they were saying, but their meaning was clear. These humans were more dangerous than they looked, and this territory was now off limits. The pack leader gave Amy one last look before leading its group back into the forest. Amy watched them go with a feeling of satisfaction. Her traps had worked perfectly and no animals had been harmed. This was exactly the kind of outcome she had hoped for. Amy checked her tablet and saw that the motion sensors were tracking the pack as it moved away from her camp. The shadow hounds were heading back toward their den and would probably spend the rest of the night trying to figure out what had just happened to them. Night 1, successful encounter with Shadowhound Pack, Amy recorded in her voice log. All traps performed as designed. No injuries to humans or animals. Subjects appeared confused but unharmed. Recommend monitoring sensor network for additional activity. Amy reset her traps and returned to her campsite. There might be more visitors before morning, and she wanted to be ready for them. She settled back into her chair and pulled out a book to read while she waited. The night was still young, and the forest was full of interesting creatures that might want to meet her. As she read, Amy listened to the sounds of the alien forest around her. There were night birds calling from the trees and small animals rustling through the underbrush. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the pack of shadow hounds she had just released, still growling to each other as they made their way home. It was a peaceful night for camping among monsters. 300 miles away from Amy's campsite, a different kind of drama was unfolding. The Zalani monitoring station had been tracking human communications since Amy's shuttle had entered the planet's atmosphere. Now their sensors were picking up something impossible. Elder Vorth stood in front of the main display screen in the monitoring room. The tall, blue-skinned alien leader had lived for over 200 years and thought he had seen everything the galaxy could offer. But the data his technicians were showing him made no sense at all. "Show me the readings again," Vorth said to his chief technician. The technician brought up a series of charts on the main screen. Elder the human landed in Sector 7 at approximately 1400 hours local time. That area has the highest concentration of Shadowhound packs on the continent. Our projections gave the human less than 6 hours to live. Vorth nodded. The Zalani had been studying Shadowhound behavior for decades. They knew exactly how dangerous those creatures were because they had lost many of their own people to them over the years. "But look at this," the technician continued. "At 2100 hours, we detected multiple energy signatures consistent with Shadowhound pack activity in the human's immediate area. There were flash explosions, sonic disturbances, and electromagnetic pulses. All the signs of a major predator encounter." "And then what happened?" Vorth asked, even though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The disturbances stopped after exactly 9 minutes and 43 seconds. The human's emergency beacon never activated. Her regular communication check-in came through right on schedule 12 hours later. She reported that her first night had been quiet and peaceful." Vorth stared at the data for a long time. According to their instruments, Amy Brooks had survived a direct encounter with a Shadowhound pack and then gone to sleep as if nothing had happened. It was impossible, but the evidence was right there on the screen. "Contact the other members of the coalition," Vorth ordered. "This information needs to be shared immediately." Within hours, representatives from 4 different alien species were gathered in the Zalani monitoring station. Ambassador Zilch from the insectoid Krathari clicked his mandibles nervously as he studied the sensor data. The Krathari had lost an entire survey team to Shadowhounds just 2 years ago. "This cannot be accurate," Zilch said. "Our warriors wore full combat armor and carried military-grade weapons. They lasted less than 4 hours against a single pack. How could one human with camping equipment survive where our soldiers failed?" Flux, the energy being who represented the Luminous, pulsed with different colors as he processed the information. The Luminous communicated through light patterns, and right now Flux was showing the colors for confusion and disbelief. "Perhaps the human has military weapons disguised as camping gear," suggested Natra, the plant-like delegate from the Verdani. Her voice sounded like wind through leaves. "Humans are known for their deceptive tactics," Elder Vorth shook his head. "Our sensors would have detected military-grade weapons. The energy signatures we recorded are consistent with non-lethal defensive systems. The human appears to be using stun weapons and restraint devices rather than killing the creatures." This revelation caused even more confusion among the alien delegates. Every species that had encountered Shadowhounds had tried to fight them with the most powerful weapons available. The idea of using non-lethal methods seemed insane. "We should investigate directly," Flux pulsed in rapid blue and white patterns. "If the humans have developed new defensive technologies, this could benefit all our species. The Shadowhound problem has prevented colonization of 17 different worlds." Meanwhile, Amy's home ship was dealing with its own version of the same situation. Commander Morrison was reading intelligence reports in his office when his communications officer knocked on the door. "Sir, we are receiving some unusual messages from the alien coalition," Lieutenant Kevin Brown said as he entered the office. "They want to know about our new anti-predator technologies." Morrison looked up from his paperwork. "What anti-predator technologies?" They seem to think that Corporal Brooks is testing some kind of advanced military equipment on Kepler 442c. The Zalani are asking for technical specifications, and the Krathari want to set up a joint research program. Morrison rubbed his forehead. He had approved Amy's camping trip, but now it was turning into a diplomatic incident. What exactly are they talking about? Lieutenant Brown handed Morrison a data pad with the alien messages. According to their sensors, Brooks engaged and defeated multiple Shadowhound packs using only non-lethal weapons. They want to know how she did it. She built her own camping gear, Morrison said. I saw her equipment before she left. It was impressive, but nothing that would interest the military. Down in the ship's recreation area, other Marines were following Amy's adventure with growing excitement. Sergeant Lisa Murphy had set up a betting pool on how many days Amy would survive. The current odds were in Amy's favor for the first time since the betting had started. Corporal Mike Davis was monitoring Amy's regular check-in reports and sharing them with anyone who would listen. Day 2, she encountered something called a razor wing. Apparently, it is some kind of flying predator with a 20-foot wingspan. Her automated defense system shot it down and then released it unharmed after taking photographs. Day 3, she had visitors from 3 different Shadowhound packs at the same time. Her traps caught all of them without any problems. She says they are starting to learn to avoid her pressure plates, so she is rotating the trap locations to keep them guessing. The other Marines were amazed by Amy's reports. She was not just surviving on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. She was thriving there and treating the whole experience like a nature documentary. Brooks is making us all look good, said Private Helen Carter. The aliens think we have some kind of super technology when really it is just Amy being Amy. Back on Kepler 442c. Amy was completely unaware of the diplomatic storm she was causing. She was sitting by her campfire on the 4th night of her trip, reading a book about trap design. Her motion sensors showed several curious Shadowhounds watching her from the tree line, but they had learned not to get too close to her camp. Amy had started leaving small gifts for the creatures. Nothing dangerous, just interesting objects that would give them something to investigate. She had learned on other planets that predators were naturally curious, and giving them puzzles to solve often kept them occupied and happy. Tonight she had left a motion-activated music box about 50 yards from her camp. Every time one of the Shadowhounds approached it, the box would play a short melody. The creatures seemed fascinated by the strange sounds and had spent hours trying to figure out how the device worked. Amy made a note in her research journal about the intelligence level of the Shadowhounds. They were clearly much smarter than the official reports suggested. Given enough time, she believed they could probably learn to use simple tools or solve complex problems. As she wrote, Amy heard the music box start playing again. She looked at her tablet and saw that 2 young Shadowhounds had found the device and were taking turns making it activate. Their adult pack members watched from a safe distance, but seemed content to let the youngsters play with the strange human toy. Amy smiled and went back to her book. Tomorrow would be her last full day on the planet, and she wanted to make it memorable. She had been planning something special for her final night, something that would really show the Shadowhounds what human creativity could accomplish. She had no idea that her camping trip was about to change how the entire galaxy thought about humanity. All she knew was that she was having the best vacation of her life, surrounded by beautiful and intelligent creatures on an amazing alien world. The music box played its melody again in the distance, and Amy fell asleep to the sound of Shadowhounds trying to solve her puzzle. Amy's final night on Kepler 442c was supposed to be quiet and peaceful. She had planned to pack her gear, clean up her campsite, and wait for her shuttle to arrive in the morning. Instead, she found herself hosting the most unusual dinner party in galactic history. It started when Elder Vorth arrived at her camp just after sunset. Amy was sitting by her fire reading when her motion sensors detected something large approaching from the south. She expected to see another Shadowhound pack, but instead she saw lights moving through the forest. Artificial lights that could only mean one thing: visitors from another intelligent species. Amy stood up and checked her equipment. Her traps were set to non-lethal mode, and her turrets were programmed not to fire at anything that moved slowly and deliberately. She had no idea who was coming to visit, but she was prepared for almost anything. Elder Vorth emerged from the tree line, followed by 3 other aliens that Amy did not recognize. The tall, blue-skinned leader raised one hand in what Amy hoped was a peaceful greeting. She raised her own hand in response and waited to see what would happen next. "Human Amy Brooks," Vorth said in accented but clear English. "I am Elder Vorth of the Zalani Council. We have been monitoring your activities on this world. May we approach your camp?" Amy blinked in surprise. She had not expected to meet any aliens during her camping trip. "Of course. Please come closer. Would you like some coffee?" The casual offer of refreshment seemed to catch the alien delegation off guard. They had come prepared for a formal first contact situation with a human military operative. Instead, they found a woman in camping clothes offering them hot drinks around a campfire. Vorth and his companions approached carefully. Amy noticed that they kept glancing around the clearing as if they expected Shadowhounds to attack at any moment. They clearly knew how dangerous this area was supposed to be. "We came to understand how you have survived in this place," Vorth said as he accepted a cup of coffee from Amy. "Our species have tried for decades to establish settlements on this world. All attempts have failed because of the creatures you call Shadowhounds." Amy gestured to her nearly invisible trap network. "It is all about understanding your environment and working with it instead of against it. These creatures are not evil. They are just following their nature. Give them something more interesting to think about than eating you, and they will usually find something else to do." She spent the next hour explaining her philosophy of defensive camping to the fascinated aliens. She showed them how her motion sensors worked and demonstrated some of her non-lethal trap mechanisms. The alien delegates took extensive notes and asked dozens of questions about human engineering and psychology. Ambassador Zilch was particularly interested in Amy's approach to predator behavior. "You study these creatures as if they were intelligent beings rather than simple animals," he observed. "Because they are intelligent," Amy replied. "Look." She pointed to the edge of the clearing where several Shadowhounds had gathered to watch the unusual meeting. The creatures were keeping their distance, but they were clearly curious about the aliens. One of the younger Shadowhounds was still playing with Amy's music box, while the adults observed the strange gathering around the humans' fire. "They have been watching me all week," Amy continued, "learning my patterns and adapting their behavior. The pack leaders have started teaching the younger ones to avoid my traps. They communicate with each other and make group decisions. That sounds like intelligence to me," Flux the energy being pulsed with colors that Amy's translation device interpreted as amazement. "You have been studying them while they studied you. A mutual learning experience rather than a conflict." "Exactly," Amy said. "I think most species approach dangerous planets like this as a military problem. You bring bigger weapons and stronger armor and try to fight your way to a solution. But sometimes the better approach is to be so interesting that the local predators decide you are worth keeping alive. Natura. The plant-like Verdani delegate rustled her leaves thoughtfully. This philosophy could revolutionize how we approach colonization of hostile worlds. Instead of fighting the ecosystem, we could find ways to become part of it. As the night went on, more aliens arrived at Amy's camp. Word had spread through the Coalition monitoring stations that first contact was happening on Kepler 442c. Representatives from 6 different species made the journey to meet the human who had turned the most dangerous planet in the sector into her personal vacation spot. Amy found herself explaining human nature to a fascinated audience of alien scientists and diplomats. They wanted to know everything about her species and especially about the human tendency to seek out dangerous situations. For entertainment, you do this for fun, asked a crystalline being whose name Amy could not pronounce. You deliberately place yourself in mortal danger because you enjoy the experience. Well, when you put it that way, it does sound a little crazy, Amy admitted. But yes, humans have always been explorers and risk-takers. We climb mountains because they are there and camp in dangerous places because it is exciting. The trick is learning how to take smart risks instead of stupid ones. The aliens were amazed by this concept. Most intelligent species avoided unnecessary danger and focused on safe, comfortable environments. The idea of seeking out hostile conditions for personal growth was uniquely human. As dawn approached, Amy began packing her gear with help from her new alien friends. Elder Vorth had already sent messages to the Coalition Council recommending that Amy's techniques be studied and adapted for peaceful colonization efforts. Other species wanted to send research teams to work with human engineers on developing better non-lethal defense systems. You have given us a new way of thinking about old problems, Vorth told Amy as her shuttle arrived to take her home. The peaceful predator will be remembered for generations, Amy laughed at the nickname. I am just a Marine who likes to go camping in interesting places, but if my trip helped you figure out how to live peacefully with the Shadowhounds, then I'm glad I came. As Amy's shuttle lifted off from the clearing, she looked down at the aliens who were already setting up their own research camp. They would spend months studying Shadowhound behavior and testing variations of Amy's trap designs. Eventually, they would establish the first successful permanent settlement on Kepler 442c. Back on her home ship, Amy filed her vacation report with Commander Morrison. The report was 3 pages long and included detailed specifications for 12 different types of non-let.